Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to a new edition of Story World Explorer, where we enter the world of the Iron Leech.
So today we had on the creators of the Iron Leech, Chad Thurman and Neal O'Brien, and we talked about a lot of great stuff. This is an amazing story that takes place in the 19th century in a whaling town of a whaling ship. We talked about potential ways that they could expand the story because of superstitions.
Yeah, superstitions seem to be like a main theme in how they can both be used to control and used to comfort people in a time where, you know, things are rapidly changing and you need something to ground you that isn't really that, wouldn't really keep you on the ground if it wasn't for the fact that the whole world is kind of changing.
Yeah, right, with the Industrial Revolution just on the other side of things, and even for power to make sure that people do what you want them to do, and you instill these superstitions and you have control of them. This is a great conversation. We came up with some really cool and exciting ideas for new content that they can use to expand out this world and to invite you guys, the audience, into experiencing what it was like to be a 19th century whalesman.
Yeah, right. Explore the world.
We explored the world. It's fantastic. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's coming right up. Or if you'd like to listen to it instead, you could find those links in the description below. Enjoy the show. Okay, great. Well, we're in conversation here with Chad Thurman and Neal O'Brien with their project, the Iron Leech. Guys, we usually get started with you giving us a little background on what the project is and what's going on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, I'm Neal O'Brien. I actually went to Columbia College in Chicago and majored in film studies. Once I got out of school, I had a focus on photography, so I was always interested in cinematography, kind of a tech guy. So we basically, to give you a little background, we shot a short film called Toe that was in stop motion. That was our first foray into animation. And so the new project that we're going to be working on is a feature-length stop motion film. So we're kind of running off of the momentum from that short, did a couple of years in the festival circuit for that. Now we're trying to build our audience so that we can tell a much larger, bigger story. And right now we're just in pre-production for that. So
yeah. And so I'm Chad Thurman, and from Louisville, Kentucky. I've known Neal since we were probably in like 5th grade.
I think so.
Yeah. So, I went to University of Kentucky and majored in history and political science. So no film background whatsoever, but throughout high school, Neal and I always made, little videos, kind of short films, comedy sketches, things like that. And for about the past 6 years or so in Chicago, we've been making a lot of comedy sketches. And then from there, we ended up getting into stop motion, wanted to do something a little bit bigger. And then that's when we did Toe, and ended up doing pretty well for that. Won some awards, went to a lot of film festivals, built up a following. We started our own animation company called Workshed Animation, and really just been building a following off of that, riding the momentum of Toe. And as Neal said, we're working on something bigger, feature-length project called the Iron Leech. And really that's where we are today. So we're just getting the script finalized and then gearing up for what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about Iron Leech. Like what's the premise of this? What's the story? Let's dive in a little bit. Let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of exactly what Iron Leech is. Outside of the fact that it's a stop motion film, let's talk about the story. So
who are the characters we should fall in love with?
Right.
Let's backstories.
Sure. Yeah. So the Iron Leech was inspired. We were trying to come up with an idea for our feature film. At that time, I was reading a lot of different literature, classic books like Moby Dick, The Sea Wolf, The Old Man in the Sea. I was definitely intrigued by this maritime setting for a story. After I read Moby Dick, I don't know if you all have ever read that book, but I was just blown away by the world it felt like it was from Lord of the Rings or something. It was just stranger than fiction, this world of these men going out to sea and hunting these whales and what they would use the whales for in the industry. And I was just really fascinated by, the dangerous life, the superstitions involved with sailors in the 19th century, just super fascinating. So kind of decided we wanted to focus on whaling, on a whaling ship as our location for this film. And then aside from that, we're super into the, Gothic movies, old movies from the, the Universal monster movies. So we kind of wanted to, and that's how the aesthetic of Toe. So that's kind of our, it's a little Tim Burton-esque, but we definitely like that black and white, foggy, gritty look to our films. So we basically decided, we were reading some Edgar Allan Poe books, and we just kind of came up with this original idea built from various books and movie influences, basically about a girl who you follow her and her brother and their close relationship in this whaling town. It's basically supposed to take place in, Massachusetts. And basically the boy gets put onto the ship, he's going out to sea on this very dangerous voyage that's going to the Arctic. On that voyage, he actually forms an enemy with one of the other crew members. And one night he actually dies. And what the crew does is they basically sweep the death under the rug. They all agree to just, act as if the boy was never on the ship and resume their voyage. What they don't know is that his sister is a stowaway on the ship. And so she basically plots this revenge. She basically avenges her brother's death. And she does so because she's a lot smarter than all these men. She preys on their superstitions, gets the crew to kind of be at odds with each other. And it all kind of leads to this boiling climax of her satisfying revenge story. So it's basically like The Revenant with a 13-year-old girl in our story. But there's a lot of historical accuracy to it. We use a lot of world building that we've read about. So it'll definitely have a pretty fascinating world that'll, hopefully draw audiences into it.
Yeah, and I think a key component to the story itself is how superstitious this whaling crew is.
Yeah.
And, we discussed this earlier, but, back in the 19th century, all these sailors, there's a lot of, in addition to like a lot of folklore, they didn't really have a firm grasp on, on science or anything like that. So it's an extremely dangerous profession. And you're sort of at the whims of very capricious weather patterns, things like that. So these sailors, extremely superstitious world that they live in. And that's essentially what this character Rowan does to get a revenge, to get these guys, to pit these guys against each other. And then, so she's just exploiting their superstitions. And that was just a really fascinating element of this world that we're kind of exploring. And yeah, so that's just like the essence of it, is that a very superstitious crew in this, this kid below deck is exploiting their superstitions in order to get revenge.
Yeah, the cool part about what you sent us, and we got a chance to look at your all's pitch deck for the story and for the world, and Jack and I were we're going to say this every single episode of the podcast, except if we're talking about Transmedia proper. Yeah. We weren't familiar with whaling at that time, and I think that's what's actually kind of fun about what we're talking about.
Even to the point you said something that kind of was like, I was like, huh? This was in America? You said Massachusetts, and I'm thinking this has to be old world. It has to be like England or.
I got England vibes too, but then again, I mean,
it
Massachusetts,
is New England,
yeah, right. That's pretty
they
old.
Named
world.
it because it was like England.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, and now I'm starting like, oh, well, I'm getting more like you think sometimes you think that the United States started with skyscrapers, and that's not really the truth.
Yeah.
Well, not if you go. We were in Vermont, and you don't see any skyscrapers there. It's all wooden huts, and yeah, wooden huts.
What part of Vermont were you in?
I got lost one of those times, but in all seriousness, the world itself is very interesting of whaling. Like you both were touched on, is the superstitions of whaling. Mm-hmm. Obviously was not familiar with any of that kind of stuff, but this is pretty well documented, kind of stuff. Like this is like what are some of the, I can't remember any of the ones off the top of my head. What were some of the superstitions that they had?
I can just I'm just going to go and read through some of
Sure.
these. Basically, one thing is you shouldn't ever whistle on a ship because it invites winds to come in. We have a scene in our movie where if you raise a goat, so a lot of times they would have livestock on these ships. If you raised a goat into the sails, it would ease a storm. There were, women weren't supposed to be on ships. They were bad luck. Let's see, what else? You weren't supposed to wave goodbye to your family as you were leaving. There were very specific days that you should depart on. A lot of it was grounded in like Christianity. So it seems like Wednesdays and Thursdays are the days that you want to set sail. And they also have things like when tattoos were very popular. A lot of sailors would have roosters or pigs tattooed on them because they believe these animals would prevent them from drowning if they fell overboard. It's a lot. The list goes on, and a lot of it is just extremely strange, but it makes sense in that time because, again, they're isolated. They're out at sea. They could, get wrecked, overturned by storms. They might go out for years and not catch a single whale. So it's kind of almost like growing crops back then. You really looked at everything as a good omen or a bad omen. They believed, seagulls were these souls of dead sailors. If somebody died on the ship and wasn't given a proper burial, there was fear that that ghost would return and curse the ship. So everyone was a little on edge, during the voyage and trying to make sure that, everything was perfect and ripe for them to be able to harvest whales.
Yeah, and redheads were bad luck. People who were cross-eyed were bad luck. Yeah. Never step foot on a ship with your left foot.
Yeah,
that was a bad omen. If you did anything like that, you were labeled a Jonah, which I guess harkens back to Jonah and the whale. So they were always vigilant for any Jonahs that were on the ship. So if so if a voyage started to go south, naturally what they would do is they would try to root out the Jonah on the ship. And, and of course, over time, just the criteria for what constitutes a Jonah just kept like piling and piling.
It's like the Salem witch hunt. It actually kind of sounds a lot like that, even in, the superstitions of things based on things that you couldn't even test, even if you wanted to.
And talking about, when we're talking about, transmedia and the different types of content you come up with, you just came up with like 10,000 more stories to tell,
Sure.
Even thinking like maybe a series of shorts of how all those started. Like in this world, how did the roosters start? He's like,
I don't know. I've never seen a pig swim before.
Well, no, one guy accidentally, this like pig fell, like it was on a spigot and then it fell into the water and it swam away. It's like, well, pigs don't drown. That's why you get one tattooed on you. Or, they could be, it seems like it might be a slight deviation from the kind of how the core of this world is.
Dark horror, grittiness.
The dark horror, more comedy. But, you could kind of make these things serious because they were serious to them. You know what I mean? And we can poke fun at them as like, oh, we know better.
Yeah. Well, that's honestly one thing that I thought was so fascinating, going back to what you all said about like, granted, this is in the 1800s, but the things you hear feel like they were just like ancient customs almost. Yeah, like these guys, again, they go out to sea. What they used, what they were able to get from the whale is incredible. So just real quick, this is something that fascinated me. When whales, their main diet is squid. So these whales will eat squid, and when they ingest the squid, if their beaks get stuck in their intestines, it will form this like bacterial growth that just grows and grows over time. And what whalers would do, this was like considered finding gold, is when they were like cutting up the whale and scrapping it, if they found this piece of this growth, which they called ambergris, they would actually pull that out and it was worth millions of dollars because the perfume trade would pay to have these little chunks of essentially just like a bacterial growth in a whale that actually created the scent for perfumes during that day. Another crazy thing that they would do with sperm whales is, this is pretty graphic and gross, but I thought it was insane, is they would actually send usually the smallest crew member, like the cabin boy, into the whale's head, where he would scoop out spermaceti. It's basically like oil in the whale's head. And they would use that for like lubricants, for candles. A lot of just like very rich people at that time would pay just crazy sums of money for these, this stuff. And, they would take the baleen from whales and turn them into umbrellas or horse buggy whips or corsets for women. So it's really just fascinating, like how this industry just took off in a span of like 50 years. It became just this like booming industry where we were just kind of wiping out whales and hunting them farther and farther away to find the packs, and just so they could bring back these barrels of oil that they could in turn turn into these, luxury items for people. So I don't know. I just thought it was really fascinating.
It actually reminds me a lot of the oil industry where, it was because all right, well, we have this, whatever, that's kind of like a whip. Well, we could throw it out or we could use it, right? For a corset, and it reminds me a lot of oil because it was like, they were just trying to make anything they could. Like every time that I see, a newly ripped up street and it says fresh oil, right? Like they cover it in oil, whatever. And I'm looking at them like, is that really the best way to make the asphalt stick? Probably not. Probably not. Like there's probably something far better for the environment to put on the ground than oil. But it's like, well, we have it. And at the time that they were making roads, like we got all this oil. Well, what are we going to use it for? Oh, we could use it for this too. And we could use, without even guessing maybe there was a better way to make a whip, probably with just straw or something like that, or just leather hide or something. But no, it had to come from a whale because of no reason except that.
Except the fact that it's hard to get,
Yeah.
Right.
But, that's a whole fascinating whale trade thing. Like, from what you guys told about whalers is that they weren't highly educated, or at least not in science. So it's like, how did these farmers essentially, how do they stumble into this, and why were they the ones to get this highly commoditized, you don't necessarily imagine, were they backed by wealthy people to get this stuff? Is that kind of how it worked? I don't know. Maybe I hope I'm not asking you too many questions about whaling.
No. So with this movie, the thing about it is we just did so much research, reading all these books about whaling. We kind of felt like we needed to be able to understand the world that we were basing this in. But essentially, the ship owners and the captains and, the top officers, they made a good amount of money, especially the ship owners. They made a lot of money. All the whalers were sometimes in debt at the end of the voyage if they bought shoes and jackets. And it all depended on how many barrels they caught. So they were definitely, but what it did is it gave them years of being fed really disgusting food, but they at least had shelter, they had food. If they were really, the best thing you could do is be good at catching whales if you're a harpooner. So that obviously required talent and skill. But aside from that, it was an interesting industry because it was the first, even pre-Civil War, it was the only industry where you could have minorities, people of color actually rise in the ranks and be a member of the crew and not actually. So there was a lot of people who actually would seek refuge on whaling ships just to get out for years and be on these voyages. It's kind of a whole nother element to it that's interesting. But at the end of the day, you look at it and you're just like, these guys went through hell for years filling these barrels and would come back and they were still poor and they would just wait until the next voyage to go out. Meanwhile, the ship owners and captains would, be profiting immensely on what they were, bringing back.
A lot of them were pretty much indentured and, put in, self-perpetuating cycle. But, back in the day, it used to be it was a very proud profession, especially if you were from New England. Families would go into the whaling industry. It was a way to have a job, come back, maybe get a little money. You can climb the ranks. And that was just the big profession at the time. As the 19th century sort of progressed, and then petroleum started to take over for whale oil. So whale oil used to be what lit all the lanterns. So they would say, whales lit the world. And his blubber, was used as lubrication for machinery. So it like greased the wheels of the Industrial Revolution. So there's a lot of like, real American hard work and gumption tied to it. That was a very proud tradition. But over time, as petroleum started to take over and just the money kind of diminished, whalers, whaling companies had no choice but to kind of get the bottom of the barrel of people. So then you'd kind of get a lot of convicts, people on the lam. It was a great opportunity if you were on the run, get on a whaling ship and you're gone for 5 years in the South Pacific. And you could desert somewhere in
some nice island.
Yeah, somewhere in the Pacific or wherever. So, so people were allured, by the idea of getting, seeking asylum, getting out, and laying low for a few years.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, you know what? Even you speaking about it now, it's getting me excited. Like, oh my god, I need to be on a whaling ship right now.
Oh yeah,
like I just want to escape for 5 years and get off on an island somewhere.
Well, it's just like, John, the mass murderer. Oh, well, he's in Mexico. Yeah, he just jumped off the boat and swam. I mean, I guess he wasn't really interested.
Oh, yeah. And people would get on the ship and they're like, what's your name? And you'd be like, John Ship. And they're like, all right. And they'd write your name on and you're on the ship.
You're born for this.
Have you ever killed anybody?
Yeah.
Before? It's like, no.
And
I mean, not on this boat.
I've killed a whale before.
Yeah, it's all they want to hear. But they would really romanticize the industry. I mean, you see all these paintings of like the beast and the hunt, and it kind of gets people excited. A lot of times they would spend weeks or months with nothing to do if there were no whales. So then that created a whole art scene where the whalers were doing, it's called scrimshaw, but they would write on the teeth of whales, beautiful, ornaments to take home just because they literally had nothing to do on the ship in the middle of nowhere.
There's also what's called land sharks, and these are recruiters that were sent out by the whaling companies to recruit people to join a voyage because, like I said earlier, after time, labor was kind of hard to come by on those whaling ships. And a lot of the times they would just go to a local pub, get chummy with some guy up at the bar, get him wasted, have him sign the contract. The next day he wakes up and he's enlisted on a whaling ship. So that was another tactic that people would use to, sort of fill the ships. So there's a pretty rich scene there of like,
I was about to say the same thing. It's a very rich world. It's an intriguing cast of characters that can come out, a bunch of different stories, the Superstitions is one part of us, could be one part of a thing, and then there's this other, like, this ragtag group of like ex-convicts, people who can't get a job otherwise, people who just want to get away from
What about the recruiter
who's trying to get people onto the ship,
and some of these could be comedies too, because for our listeners, Chad is one of the contract writer for The Onion, so he does do comedy stuff, and they have done comedy stuff in the past, as they said in their introduction. So some of these could be funny; they don't all have to be black and white and gray and serious.
But because you have to follow something core of the world. Like
sure,
there was what was the I think it was a Steel Philippek. Yeah, Steel Philippek. They have there's a great it's like How to Build a Better Story World. It's a podcast, you could listen to it. But one of the main things he's like what's the one thing that separates your world from the real world? And so it's like everyone has that core lie, and like it's something you can always come back to. It's like an obvious one is like Star Wars, it's like the Force exists and there's laser swords, And I probably pissed off a lot of Star Wars fans by calling it a laser sword.
Correction.
Yeah, right. That was pretty accurate.
Or Hollywood, or Harry Potter is like witches and wizards exist, and Gandalf the Grey blocks Sardar or Mordor or something.
That's two different things. But I like Hollywood Potter though. That sounds like that's in a different universe. Hollywood
Potter. No, but like, what is that? Like, what is the whalers? What is this whaling world? Was the Iron Leech world?
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, if you guys, and this might be something that you might have to chew on for a little bit, and then we come back to it. But what is that lie? What do people keep coming to this world for? Is it romanticized
Whaling?
like freedom almost from being in it. It's an odd juxtaposition between being an indentured servant, which makes you free. Or is it something, well, I mean, that also is just a part of the world as opposed to what the story is, which is kind of this superstitious kind of like not real, but it's something you all believe, which could be true of the romantic element of it.
Yeah. Well, we do focus, we kind of ride this line of the story of superstition versus realism. And we have characters like, for instance, our main villain his name's Captain Polk, and he is just a realist who exploits his crew. His only objective is to get to this place in the Arctic where he swears there are these bowhead whales that he can seize and make a lot of money basically off this voyage. But what our character Rowan does is she starts getting the crew to question whether or not they are on a cursed ship and that there's a ghost on board. And that isn't directly conflicting with Captain Polk. Captain Polk does not believe in ghosts or that the ship is cursed at all. He just wants to get to the spot, but she's getting in their heads, and especially capitalizing on one character named Judd, who is a longtime sea veteran, strongly believes in superstition and bad omens and good omens. And so she kind of uses him as a vessel to spread the word of this ship is cursed. So that creates this like inner turmoil where people are, and especially as they're getting deeper in the Arctic and the conditions are getting more severe for everyone, she really kind of is like a pulling the puppet strings on this ship to where she's not even actually physically getting revenge. She's just mentally setting them up to kind of internally combust. And so I think for the viewer, what's going to be interesting is kind of seeing what that life is like and how if you were on that ship, you could start to believe those things. You could see where the superstition comes from. But the whole movie, as much as it deals with superstition, it's all grounded in reality. Nothing is supernatural that ever occurs in the film. So I don't know if that answers your question at all, but yeah, it's kind of, we are intrigued by that world of it's making it feel like there's something supernatural occurring when there's not. Yeah.
But it's also kind of interesting because the superstition, because the main villain is such as realist, it's kind of interesting that the superstition is kind of almost making those crew members like better people in a sense, because now they're feeling guilty and they're feeling like they're being cursed for something they did wrong, whereas this main villain, who's the total realist, has no guilt for killing that kid or wiping his thing. He just wants to get his money and get it through. So it is kind of, I don't know if that's a theme. I don't know if that's something that can be kind of pushed through multiple different forms of content. Like, could that be, that could be the like the lie could be your superstitions is what makes you a good person, at the end of the day. I mean, someone might argue that. Yeah, I guess.
Depend on whether that person truly felt empathy, if it caused them to feel empathy for what happened or sadness, or if they're just worried about their own lives. That
I mean, so that could be something to be said about what the opinion of human beings are. Like, is it really empathy and compassion that compels you to do something, or is it the fact that you're afraid that some weird mystical thing is going to judge you? Or you have some
karma or something.
Karma. Is that the reason? Do people do it out of compassion, or are they certain people only? Well, I mean, the other thing is that what is it? Captain Polk kind of sort of is the epitome of without superstition there is no compassion. Essentially, right? I don't know. That's just something I was picking up on that I'm trying to see if you could tie it into different stories.
Yeah.
And kind of make so the comedy would also feel like you're still set in this world. So it could be it could be different medium, but it could still feel like, oh, this is just one of these stories, It's funny this time, not so serious, because he's thinking that if he tattoos a pig on himself, he won't die because pigs don't drown based on this one instance, and somehow this makes everybody get a tattoo, but also makes them all learn how to swim. It's like, it's only in fear of some superstition that gets people to be good people. I don't know. that could be an avenue that you guys can explore.
Yeah, we definitely explore sort of the consequences of superstitions and I guess like what people's motivations are. Obviously, Polk is using superstition as a way of maintaining control over his men. His whole backstory, which we explain early in the first act via a puppet show that the main character's Thomas, who's Rowan's brother. Him and Rowan are watching a puppet show, and it sort of gives a little bit of backstory about the Iron Leech, the ship itself, as well as Polk's, his whole mythology. And I would equate it to kind of that scene in Jurassic Park where they're watching that cartoon and it's that dino DNA scene where, you're kind of giving some exposition there in sort of a fun way. Yeah. But he uses that superstition in order to exploit his crew members, also the people in the town of Bedford, which is where, the hometown where the port is. Then you have kind of superstitions with this crew, who had murdered and covered up the boy's death, how they're dealing with it. And for them, it's mostly for self-preservation. So they have sort of their own selfish means of practicing this. But then you also have, not to throw too many characters and like little storylines at you, but there's another protagonist that's on the ship that was friends with Thomas, and then him and Rowan later team up. And he's the one who truly just feels guilty and wants to atone for some wrong that was made for, more selfless reasons and just more for, I guess, just the simple virtue of not sweeping this boy's death under the rug and righting a wrong. And all three of those sort of approaches and those mentalities come to a head at the end. So it is we do explore that. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it's definitely a big theme that we flesh out. And it's a theme that ultimately may or may not spell Polk's demise at the end, but you know how those movies turn out. But yeah, no. So we do explore that scene, and it does sort of come to fruition and sort of in that grand climax.
What's like it's superstition being used to control, right?
Or,
it's being
and superstition also being necessary almost. I mean, not like
to
necessary,
survive.
That's essentially why these things start. Superstitions they usually start based on some good advice that gets extrapolated into some weird thing. But it's almost like it's important for the society to work, for those superstitions to work. Right. Because, it's like there's a reason why those things exist. And I think that, like, if, just talking about more transmedia and how you can tell different stories and how they can all be kind of linked in, that can be one of the major, like, things that kind of come back to this in this whaling world. It comes back to this superstition, and like maybe people can question it and people can but sometimes it's like even at the end of it's the the white lie that is better than the truth sometimes. Yeah. One kid is afraid to be on, like a young kid, he needs to run away from his house because he is convicted, or his father was convicted of murder and he's getting charged with it, but he doesn't know how to swim. And he's on this whaling ship, and the one guy's like, I can get you on a whaling ship. He's like, but I don't know how to swim. He's like, don't worry, just tattoo a rooster on your thing and you'll never drown. Yeah. The guy's like, is that true? And he's like, yes, it is. And he gets on the ship. But is
that Sam Elliott doing that?
Of course it is.
Yes, it is. No, but absolutely. That's okay. I like that. That seems like a pretty good place to kind of anchor the entire world around. It's very much that the superstition. It's used for power and control. It's used to encourage, like in this weird random comedy movie that we're pitching you guys of the recruiter, played by Sam Elliott. That it's a comedy, but it's all still surrounded by the fact that you're using superstitions in terms to convince people to do things or to reassure them that everything's going to be okay. Like we've just been saying, these whaling ships, these whaling expeditions were extremely dangerous. There was no guarantee where you're going to find anything. Everything was all based off of
half the time you ended up in debt. So, after.
But that doesn't get anybody on a ship. what gets people on a ship is like, no, this is guaranteed to work because everybody stepped on this boat with the right foot. And let me tell you, we're leaving on Thursday at 9 a.m. because that's when when we, that's when the prophecy was, whatever.
And
but you
the captain,
reassure and you reassure and you reassure.
And the
through superstition.
The captain has a tattoo of a rooster, which means he can literally strangle a whale if it comes on board.
Right, and then the harpoonist, he accidentally shot himself in the arm one time, and that's incredibly good because now he can't do that again.
Yeah, right. Right.
They did say you got to spill blood. Like the first few days of the voyage. That's good for a voyage. I don't know why you think it'd be the opposite, but I think it just means you've kind of leveled. You got behind you a little bit.
There you go. Let's see. I made up that last one, and there was a little bit of truth to it.
You can make up a lot of these. But no, I think that's true. It is kind of like, where do these? Because obviously, even today, we still hold on to a lot of superstitions, and depending on who you ask, they might be extremely superstitious. Where that comes from, who knows? It's but it's an interesting thing to think about. And I think you mentioned this: the sense of comfort that you get by it. Obviously. Yeah. That's an interesting thing to explore that, it's reassuring when you get some sign that's supposed to mean something.
Right. Yeah.
It's like in a world where you don't really understand what's going on, superstition is the means of controlling your own destiny. Yeah. Or so you think.
Right.
Like interpreting so much is out of your control. It's a way to at least try to understand elements that could benefit you.
So I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of interesting stories that you can kind of dive into to kind of explain the origin of superstitions and why people actually felt that way.
I mean, even going to, and there's a couple of other things I want to talk about the story too, but just leading off of that, as we're talking about superstitions, and we're talking about getting this stop motion animation film made. Right? That's the goal. Yeah. And you guys would love to do it and not have to work full-time jobs while doing it. Mm-hmm. Is that a good assumption there?
Subdued, yeah.
It's like I mean, well, because it's almost like, well, if, right? But we're starting to sound like snake oil salesmen. But let me tell you, if you do a Transmedia thing, it's going to happen like that.
And if you tattoo a duck on your arm, let me tell you, it's an old whaling trick.
It's an old
means every project's going to get funded for the next 5 years.
Yeah, right. Ever go down to Hollywood, one of those suburbs? All the producers, they all have a duck tattoo. Which would be kind of crazy. Maybe we'll start something like that. This for fun. But you have superstitions, and Neal, just like what you said, there are so many superstitions that are out right now that still exist right now. Like that's something that's still there.
And something else that was kind of, because I was reading the deck and then you saying that, you have to control your destiny in a world that you don't know where everything's going. But you were also saying that the Industrial Revolution was happening right at that moment. Mm-hmm. And that had to, what was that? Like
very scary.
Very scary. In 100 years, the technology went from hose to steam power and shit like that,
Oh, yeah.
And that has to be really confusing, especially to these older guys that grew up on harnessing the wind, and now all of a sudden someone's saying, well, if you just blew this thing up in the back, it'd be able to do it without the wind.
Right.
So it's almost a sense of even like the older generation trying to hold on to some power over the youth that might understand a little bit more about how the world works, but also just comfort, like we were saying. Like there is some comfort in, I don't know what, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We might discover how to fly tomorrow. Who the hell knows?
Oh, right.
There's that whole thing of every day is going to be changing. And that's something that even we could relate to today.
Sure.
As in how the next iPhone is going to come out and the other one before it's going to be completely useless.
Well, no, take it from a social media site with people that, you grow up with Facebook and then all of a sudden it's like, ugh. Have you heard of TikTok? And TikTok, I get that feeling of being like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I couldn't even figure out what's going on, even if I wanted to. Yeah.
And we just a couple days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, Jeff Bezos shot into space in a penis-shaped rocket. So, just talking about all these advancements, you could go out on a 5-6 year whaling voyage using a sailboat and you'd come back,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden a steamship just blows right by you. And
Yeah.
that would just
Oh,
rock
shit.
the world.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah, right, exactly. So
Mhm.
there's that there it's kind of superstition. It's like almost superstition kind of grounds you in a weird way. It's
Yeah.
like superstition can ground you, and that's an odd world to live in,
Right.
where your superstitions are actually, well, this is keeping me down here.
So there's there's literally two different ways that you guys can go with this story world, right? And all of our loyal listeners know that we're going to eventually go over to that. I mean, I thought of two different things. One was the way that you use superstitions. It could be very much rooted in the 1800s in like all these stories surrounding whaling and the superstitions of that time and the entering into the Industrial Revolution. It could be that. What do you think I'm saying?
No, I
Oh,
said,
you're-
yeah, I think that's where you would put it.
So you
I don't
could-
know if
okay,
I don't know
you-
if I'm gonna like your second.
You don't think you're
suggestion.
gonna right before even hearing it. But so anyway, so you can have it focused on that in that time period, all these different stories and stuff, and so that like an introductory like a podcast or a blog or something that's really easy for you guys to do now. And we know, and by the way, folks, you should follow them on all their social media sites because they have a relatively large following because of their puppet making and all the stop motion stuff and how cool all that stuff is. So if you're interested in that, the links are definitely down in the description. But you would focus mostly on that type of era with any smaller, easy to make content that could tell a different story. Maybe the story that leads up to the Iron Leech, maybe the origin story, like you just said, Chad, the origin that you had like a little puppet show in the beginning, but maybe that could be like the whole separate thing where it kind of introduces you to everything, where you guys could do it through audio storytelling or some other medium where it'd be easier for you guys to do and wouldn't be so time consuming and get people interested in the story of the Iron Leech. Or you could take it from a different standpoint and talk about how superstitions going through just time periods, right? Like I thought like a podcast on talking about superstitions then to now, like what are we superstitious about now, depending on what we were superstitious about back then with whaling.
Yeah.
I think that would be that would be an interesting podcast to listen to.
Yeah.
Talking to, I don't know, psychics. You could just go to the local psychic in your area and just knock on the window and be like, hey, what should I be afraid of today? And just have a conversation.
Frank also has all of those in a Rolodex. So if
I
you
know,
wanna
I spot them. They're everywhere.
If you
They're
wanna know where
I
they
see them
are
all
in your
the
local
time.
neighborhood. He'll be
Oh,
able
yeah.
to tell you exactly.
All the time.
No, but I mean, I was also thinking about like different ways to tell stories about superstition. Like I don't know why I just thought of this, but like maybe an odd way to tell a story would be like it would be a voyage, but you would only get like little like I was thinking like captain's logs or like first mate, like what they saw that day, all these types of things. So you could kind of almost piece together if like one week it'd be the captain's log, and he would just have written what he had done that day, and then the next week could have been some other first mates or could have said something,
That would be
and
really
you could
cool.
kind of piece together after they like a whole year, you could piece together that voyage and you can understand why they all think the superstition they thought. You know what I mean?
But as you read, you're like, no, what actually happened was this.
Right,
This is what's
exactly.
actually happening.
If-
But as you piece it, oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
Guys, steal that. That's really good.
Write that down. Are you referring to like, would this be almost like
this
website
could be like-
blog or like?
yeah, this could be a blog, yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be like the story of just come up with a ship name.
Which would
You know?
be, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Just-
like the smoky
the smoky bear.
the smoky whale or the smoky fish. I don't know why smoky's coming up in my head.
I don't know either.
I don't know.
I just
Just
pictured
come up with a better
whale
name
with
than that. The
I pictured
HMS Smoky Bear
Yeah.
is yours. Take it.
I saw
I
a
won't
smoky
sue
whale.
unless you have the whole name down.
The smoky whale. I saw a whale with a cigar. Is that
Yeah.
on the side there, just like the logo
Yeah, like-
on their flag?
like- No, what's it? The crawfish. Yeah, the smoking crawfish. There you go. Like one of the big ones. But that would be kind of an interesting way that I think could be kind of fun, and you can explore. And then what also could be kind of cool is that when the movie comes out, you can reference that voyage somehow, somewhere in a throwaway line.
Yeah.
that no one needs to understand what they're talking about. It's like,
Right.
this reminds me of what happened to the smoking crawfish, you know?
Sure.
And you'd be like, what the hell? It's like, what's that? Oh, it's like, it's on their fucking website. You could read the whole damn thing.
The fans would be like, the smoking crawfish, I remember that.
I
and
know
then
that
go
one.
back and then share that with it. And once again, like,
But
and
yeah, you know, just different ways for your audience to interact with the
Yeah.
world,
This
You
world.
know what I mean?
I really like Jack's idea. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Because it's
Sometimes they
low,
have them.
it's low, not impact.
Low
Hopefully
cost.
it's high impact.
Low
right.
cost.
It's low. It's a low
And-
stress thing. You guys can plan it over, and it could
And,
just
you
be
know,
little tiny little
Right,
snippets.
it's captain's logs. It's like, what would he have saw that day?
A
It'd be
diary
like
of the-
four
of
or
the
five
deck
paragraphs
boy or whatever.
for a year. For
Yeah.
a year, each time it's a different character with a different voice. It'd be a good creative exercise at the end of the day.
Sure.
You know, and yeah. When it pieces together, you're like, no, that's not what that was. Jeez, we all know what it is. But this guy's like, it must have been a mermaid. I didn't get my duck tattooed on. This is why. John must have stepped on the book with his left foot. This is why we're seeing these things, you know? It would all be, it'd be there, and you'd be like, the audience would be like, why are they, Jesus Christ, these superstitious fucks.
Yeah, I love that because we honestly, a lot of the material that we gathered, like back then, the way that they through captain's logs and diaries, that's a lot of material for knowing actually what did occur on a ship. So it's somebody's perception of events that happened. So we've read like diaries of like a 10-year-old girl whose father is a captain. She's just kind of on the ship, and her experience of seeing whales being cut up and stuff. So you could do an interesting, you know, for more of some of our more like flavorful characters like Judd, who's super superstitious. You know, you could harken back to a voyage that went really badly where they thought a ghost was on the ship that would lead to his ideas on this ship. And so that would be interesting to just explore the different characters and, you know, their views.
Yeah. And that was just something that I was thinking about listening to the Houston Howard interview was that got me thinking like, oh, where can I pepper in little Easter eggs throughout the script that can be developed into little, you know, like other side stories or other ways that we can, you know, build an audience or just create these other stories. Something like a logbook, or making a small reference of, you know, whatever happened on this previous voyage. And then you have, like you said, and then you have that like paper trail through other things like the website. And I love the idea of creating like a fake logbook or a journal. And I guess just maybe the history major in me. I love like historical artifacts and just the versatility of what things used to look like back in that day. And if you could do it with that conceit, you might be able to get people. I don't know if it would really appeal to, you know, history buffs or anything like that, but there could be something to milk out of that as well as you know, just the world of whaling, or people are fascinated in the mysticism of superstition and stuff like that. But I think that there's just a lot of avenues that you know, a lot of audiences I think that you can really appeal to with the story. There's history, there's you know, horror fans, there's whaling, you know, people who are into whaling or maritime trades. It's probably not too big of an audience, but then people are really into like,
it's gonna be your biggest audience. They're gonna.
What are you talking about? There's an exhibition that just left
no,
Lake Michigan yesterday.
Yeah, the McCormick Center was just packed in the Maritime Festival. I don't know how you missed it.
Hey, it's a game. It's a game of inches. So you know, you
60 billion strong. The maritime.
Dozens of
60 billion.
Yeah, 60 billion, 10x the world's population right now.
Right. But no, I mean, I think when you build that, just using like Blair Witch Project as an example of a movie that you know used a fake website, fake books about the witch, all leading up to the film itself. So people, I remember when I was a kid, I was like reading the lore and was too scared to even see the movie when it came out.
That's amazing.
You know, at that time, so it's almost like you can build the world prior to the movie actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
and we would argue that you absolutely have to.
Yeah,
you
should.
have to.
You should.
Because like even what we're talking about, like, well, Chad, you said another piece of content that would be fantastic is doing like an actual written book that would be from all these different perspectives.
Right.
That once again, it's kind of like a mystery almost that the audience is on. It's trying to, because if they end up following you guys in this world, which at the moment we'll just call the Iron Leech, right? The world of the Iron Leech. And they're like, wait, hold on one second. This can't be true. Is it? Is this real? Is this the one time that they deviate away from this lie, this core principle that superstitions are used for power, or they're used to influence, or they're not real, but they're such a powerful tool at this time?
Right.
Are they going to finally do it? Or better yet, it's how are they going to do it? Wait, I thought the dog had something to do with it, but I guess not. You know, like whatever, as they're reading through that. Once again, I think an even separate voyage from the three that we have, or they could be in the town or anywhere, really. I mean, you have like the whole world set in a time period, you know?
Yeah.
You know,
and it's just like, because there is that whole other thing about the superstition, not of whalers, but of whalers. Like, it's like, oh, well, the whole town could be talking about, you know, these whalers that come into town and they never can drown. You know, I don't know why I keep coming back to the tattoo thing, but that's just the one thing.
I like how you rhymed there. You said they come into town, they never drown.
Right.
Start singing a song at the local saloon.
But, you know, that's a whole different, like, you know, the families of the people that know the whalers, you know, they superstition, or what are the superstitions that they're holding? Like, what do they do to make sure that their husband comes back safe? You know, that's, or, you know, like,
don't hang your laundry on a Saturday.
Yeah, right. Or, you know, the girl isn't allowed to go to the beach when, you know, the whole time his father's gone, because a woman next to the shore will, you know, be close to the ship and it might end the voyage early.
Right.
But yeah,
with that
I would.
petition,
Yeah.
you know, and then it presents a whole world of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas.
Well, even like the book that you've worked on with the Onion, kind of that framework of creating, it's almost like there's a lot of humor involved in it. But if you were just like reading a book that's talking about, like, you know, if you rub 2 turtle shells together, that'll keep you, you know, storm away for 7 days or something. You know what I mean? It's just like goofy little, it gets to a point where it's like, you don't know what's even true or not.
Yeah. Like
newspaper.
Turtles, I heard it was crabs.
No, but that kind of sounds like one of those.
Blizzard. You know what
It
it
sounds like one of those was it one of those patent medicine salesmen at the time too? He'd be selling you a little, like, well, you see, you know, the newest superstition today is
the superstition of the day, like a soup of the day.
Yeah, right. It's like, I've been to all over the world, and I know the superstitions that work and don't work.
The superstition du jour.
Yeah.
So it'd be,
But no, I like that. It's interesting.
Yeah, and you guys have been doing a fantastic job once again on building up the audience that's surrounding, of course, stop motion, which is very popular. It's very interesting. It's very difficult. It's very hard work. We did want to give you a compliment on
right.
Toad.
We also want to say that technically, your short film was technical. I was like, this, they made this?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this seems like it was, you know, paid to be made.
Right.
Thank you.
So technically is flawless. I mean, I'm not the biggest stop motion person, but I know good things when I see them.
It kind of freaks them out a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I always say that anything stop motion that Wes Anderson makes is like he was directing my nightmares as a child, because I saw that and I was like, oh my God, I would, like, what was it, Dog Army or Island of Dogs or something? That was literally, I had a nightmare in that particular mode for like 10 years when I was younger. Like, every time I'd have a bad dream, it would look like that. It freaks me out.
Oh, there's something just inherently creepy about stop motion. And I think with the project that we're doing, it translates well to horror.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. But that's not to say that, I mean, the story itself, once again, I'm really excited about Iron Leech and this world that we're kind of talking about, kind of fleshing out, because it really does have that potential. And I think that for the most part, a lot of stories do have that potential to be fleshed out and to, you know, excite everybody that's involved, everybody that's involved with it.
And another cool thing about the whole captain's log book idea about this phantom ship that, you know, we don't know exactly what happened is, like, it kind of reminds me of, like, the whole reason why Knives Out was such a popular movie when it came out was because they all had everyone had this conflicting story, and we knew that the guy, the detective, was figuring it out. But almost in this particular instance, there's no mystery to solve, but there is a mystery to solve because as you're reading it, you're like, wait, hold on, that doesn't match this part.
Right.
What does this happen? And how does this have to deal with this? And did they kill that guy because they thought this was what happened? And then we can kind of figure out, like, you know, it kind of gives you into the mindset of those people while still keeping your lens in the real world. You know what I mean?
Right.
But allows you to be like, oh, this is the type of world I'm entering.
It's interactive. Yeah, it's like an
it's
interactive
kind of interactive
story. Yeah.
And you could have a big thing about, you know, a big questionnaire about what happened on the ship. You know, that could be a whole thing that in your Raven fans will figure out and debate and have YouTube documentaries breaking it all down. That's what you want.
That's what you want.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And then when that movie comes out,
right, you won't be able to stop them.
You won't be able to stop them.
I like that.
Yeah, but those are some really interesting ideas, and you know, just the concept of transmedia, and it really does just get the gears kind of churning in your head.
Yeah.
Like how much, because you know, on the surface, I'd always considered the Iron Leech just to be a one and done project, and because it's sort of like this doesn't have like this isn't going to blow up into some franchise, but you know, the more you read into it, it's like, you know, the more you realize, well, you could actually do, you know, a lot of it is it's about building your audience and you know, sort of exploiting and tackling different, you know, forms of, you know, podcasts, books, create a website. You can get all the puppets and the set pieces together and do, you know, like some exhibit at like, you know, a local museum or a cafe, or go to a horror convention and have all your set pieces there and just build that audience. And then when you come to an investor, not only do you have such a wider pool of people kind of chomping at the bit to see the project, but you've got a lot more ammunition to say, well, this is just much bigger than a one-off movie. It's got more potential.
Right.
And those are the things that you realize when you really kind of start digging into it.
Mitigates risk, and it gets the creator very excited to think of all the different types of things you can make.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
He or she.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't I mean, even a video game about a whaling ship going out and trying to find your own whales. You know,
have to find your own whales, and the fact that superstitions really do affect you. Like you can have little
in that
superstition
case,
meters. It's like all your decisions. You know, it's like, oh god,
it's a high break risk for you know.
The crew is like against you because you went with the wrong foot. You know.
Right.
Because you say I'm a realist.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and you also have like Bill McCafferty. I don't know if this is Transmedia, but I've got a friend of mine distills his own liquor, and he has his own like liquor distillery, and he's got one brand. It's called Sea Legs, and that kind of had me thinking. It was like, could you somehow get a special liquor made that is somewhat incorporated with the world as well?
Absolutely.
And if you have fans, they're gonna want to drink it. How many people would drink Duff beer right now?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, right.
If they would do it.
We're and I was like thinking about that, the clothing style from back then. I watch our puppet maker like meticulously craft these miniature, like true to life clothing. She'll research exactly what. I remember we had a debate for the sweater. We were like, did stripes exist back then? We were like looking at like what did people wear, and you look at all these photos, you know, from like the early 1900s, late 1800s, and you'll just get a grasp of. And some of it's actually surprisingly really stylish, and you almost see those trends coming back today. Where it kind of opens up the door for like, you know, cool.
Iron Leech.
Why wouldn't somebody want to dress up like Captain Polk? I mean, it could come back, but that is transmedia. It's the offering of, hey, re-explore the world in a different medium, and real life is one of the different mediums.
I mean, get an authentic whaling sweater from the world of. I mean, people would do it.
Yeah. Well, and there's also
if they're making 20-minute YouTube explainer videos on.
He can't be dressed up like as he did the review. He would have to be dressed up.
He would have to be dressed up in a whaling sweater. Right. You know, obviously.
Yeah.
For sure. And there's been a resurgence, especially on TikTok, of sea shanties. And really popular for a while. So you could come out with, you know,
an album.
An album.
Yeah, for sure. And sea shanties are they're so absurd when you go back and listen to them. That's really something that you can just have a lot of fun with too.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it just makes you think about
amazing ones.
Just these ridiculous little ideas like, horror sea shanties, or like, you know, from that time period that somehow woven in with that story world.
That's actually cool.
So we have an idea, or at least one thing that I would love to do is to sail down to Cuba. Like that would be like one of my dreams. Like that would be a lot of fun to do. But obviously, if you're gonna do that, you have to have some sea shanties ready to go because I'm not on a ship that nobody's talking on. Like we're gonna be singing the entire time down.
And there's no phones on this ship.
Right. But
we do have a GPS. But,
right.
You know.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, if we start
Partially
just seeing blue, then we don't see the shoreline anymore. We're probably not going in the right direction. But like, we did come up with a sea shanty for Stipulations.
I don't remember
because we made a cocktail called Pirate Radio, and Jack took it in the direction of like pirates, like the Caribbean. And it's like no, like pirate radio is like a different thing.
Yeah. So we came. Our pirate radio station is the only pirate radio that only plays sea shanties.
Right. So it's a true pirate radio.
Oh,
that's an awesome.
You got a shanty for us right now?
Yeah.
No, I
you don't remember?
I don't remember.
It'd be all right with the wind beneath our sails.
We'll be all right with the wind beneath our sails. We'll be all right.
All right. Yeah, but you got to start it off though. You're the one. You just go the one time and then I join in.
But and we get drunk all day.
We'll drink all day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Common shanties.
Okay, so we'll be all right with the wind beneath our sails.
We'll be all right with the wind beneath our sails.
We'll be all right with the wind beneath our sails, and we'll drink all day. That was the only.
That was our sea shanty.
That was our she shanty.
You can do so much with a pirate radio show. Even you could have people call in and stuff. All these like sketches. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, no, I think I took.
And it has to be pirate, so it can't be like pirate radio means that they're not literally, they shouldn't be on that frequency or something. They're like hijacking. Shut down. Yeah, they're hijacking the frequency.
Right. Oh yeah.
So and that's why it's the ultimate pirate radio.
Yes. That's pretty good. I like it.
That's great.
All right, you write that down. That shanty. We'll just use that in our phone.
Yeah, we'll listen to the recording and get it.
Yeah, you guys go ahead and listen to it too. That's another great idea.
Well, I think we did a better version of it for the beginning of the Stipulations episode. We'll send you that and the.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun though.
Yeah.
Well, guys, the hour. Oh my goodness, it's already an hour 4. Has just absolutely flown by. This has been a great conversation. We usually end off with you giving us your best pitch for somebody to come check you guys out specifically, and then also get them excited for the Iron Leech world as they heard it here and now, and they're going to be disappointed if you don't take some of our ideas. But go ahead.
Yeah. I'll be honest. Prior to this interview, I didn't have any idea. I didn't have the pitch prepared, but I guess I would say that the Iron Leech is a 19th century maritime horror story about a girl who stows away on a whaling ship and gets revenge on the crew who murdered her brother. And, like we were talking about earlier, I think the project itself just has a lot more potential than just a one-off film. But there's a lot of interesting elements with the world, history, maritime lore, whaling, mysticism, and then two big components is horror and stop motion. And what I think really separates this project apart from other, films that are being made today, especially in the horror genre, is that it's stop motion. There's no real adult content that's in stop motion that's serious, especially within the horror genre. So I think in that sense, we're really exploring new territory there. So I think that there's something really cool with that.
And there's a market out there. We've done the festival circuit with Toe and just got so much feedback from adults who would like to see more long form stop motion, that's not, kiddish or made for, 10 and under. Like people want to see some stories that deal with adult themes. And, the horror community is just, very excited about this type of project. And we have artists from all over the world who are wanting to help us build this world. So we have puppets being shipped to us from all over. And, a big thing that we're trying to do to build our audience is show the entire process of us actually putting this film together. So if you follow our social media platforms, you'll see all the behind the scenes of us constructing sets, animating, and just kind of getting through this film, inch by inch. So, over time, I think a lot of people are really fascinated by that art process. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'm definitely hoping that we get some sort of an invite while you guys are actually doing some shooting stuff, because I think you haven't seen anything like that before, have you? No, I don't think so. So I have never seen anything, so that'd be really cool to do. It's kind of like a catch up with you guys after the podcast is released. We could put that out and everything and be like, hey, and here they are, they're working on it still, what's going on? And we'll sing some sea shanties. It could be a whole little episode. That actually might be a lot of fun. We'll put that on the books, because we're trying to make it a point. If you didn't know, we were drinking Ham's beer, one of the early versions of the podcast, which we recorded 6 episodes prior to quarantine happening, was that we would go to their apartment or their house or their office, and we'd bring a 6-pack. Right, and we just all get 2 beers. Obviously, with you guys, we probably have to bring an extra one because there's an extra person. Or you guys would just share the beers. Jack and I get 2 each.
Yeah, you would share the 2 beers. It would be 1 beer for each of you, 2 beers for us.
But
we have to get through the podcast, guys.
Yeah, right. But so that was kind of but our goal now is we have to start to reconnect with these people that we met through the quarantine and actually had beers with them. Obviously, we could have done this in person, but Zoom is so amazing. I don't have to worry about any of your setup. I just got to worry about my setup. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in real life, meeting Neal for the first time. I've met Chad, but Jack hasn't met either of you in person.
He hasn't met either of you in real life either.
Yeah. Well, who was I talking to? But gentlemen, we're really looking forward to seeing how this world grows and how this world expands. And you have us at your disposal for anything that you think that we can help with. You just got to reach out, and we'll be there with a toe in hand. Isn't that a saying? No. With a toe in hand? No. I'm gonna have my toe in my hand.
It sounded good.
Thank you. I need to get validated every once in a while.
But yeah,
now, Neal, if he comes with a toe in his hand, that's on you.
Yeah.
It'll be I can get pig toes. A pickled pig toe?
A pickled pig toe. Now he's left.
You come with a toe, there'll be no questions asked.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to.
There you go.
You're in good.
Wow, that's really big. That's a huge toe.
Juicy one. And Jack, you're going to have to get a toe yourself if you come over. So
it's an entrance fee.
Now I have to get
now
a
it's
toe.
like
all right, well,
animation, entry fee.
Thank
alrighty,
you
guys.
for inviting us on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a real pleasure, guys. So great talking to you all, and we had a blast.
Well, that was a fantastic episode. I mean, what a world to explore. I mean, we are getting a chance to explore worlds that otherwise we'd know nothing about.
That's
anime,
right.
Now whaling.
And stop motion.
And stop motion,
that we
exactly.
weren't really into, but
we don't have a lot of experience.
Don't have a lot of experience in, but there are fantastic places to explore, and you know what? It just makes us better creators.
Yes, it does. So, if you like that episode, well, you should definitely check out some of the other ones from this new Story World Explorer, also known as Season 3 of In Conversation, whichever way you want to go about it. We changed the name because
it makes more sense.
It makes more sense. It sounds a little bit more whimsical too.
Yeah, right.
I like it. Thanks for watching.